Madden Park Homes. The Madden Park Homes were completed in 1970 and contained 279 units in 3 9-story buildings and 7 buildings that were 3 stories tall. The project was the last high-rise built by the Chicago Housing Authority and was located in the Oakland neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. The Black Gangster Disciples dominated the project in the 1970s. In the 1980s and 1990s, the Gangster Disciples and Black P. Stones beefed over control of Madden Park, leading to numerous murders. In the mid-1990s, a large fraction of the Gangster Disciples became Black Disciples, and a war between GDs and BDs erupted. In 1999, demolition of the Madden Park homes began and the last building was torn down in 2005. Number 6, Stateway Gardens. Stateway Gardens was constructed in 1958 and contained 1,644 units in 2 buildings that were 10 stories tall and 6 buildings of 17 stories. It was located in the Bronzeville neighborhood and was part of the State Street corridor, which included the Robert Taylor Homes, Dearborn Homes, Heraldic East, and Hilliard Homes. A few years after it was constructed, Stateway was plagued by gang violence and organized crime. By the 1980s, most of the Dell Vikings gang joined the BDs, but some members of the Dell Vikings united with the Black Gangster Disciples. The gangs fought for control of the Stateway Gardens, leading to numerous murders. In the 1990s, the Gangster Disciples and Black Disciples continued to beef for control of the buildings, intimidating security guards at the property. When gang members entered the complex, guards would look the other way. Several guards were attacked and even stabbed at the development. The Stateway Gardens was one of the most dangerous projects in the nation, and by the 2000s, the first set of residents were vacated and demolition began in 2001. By 2006, the last residents were vacated, and in 2007, the last buildings were torn down.
Number 7, Dearborn Homes. The Dearborn Homes were located in the Bronzeville neighborhood on the south side of Chicago and contained 800 units within 16 buildings, each 6 stories, or 9 stories tall. The complex was constructed in 1950 and was the first high-rise project completed by the Chicago Housing Authority. In the 1960s, the Cobra Stones, formerly the Egyptian Cobras, currently the Mickey Cobras, controlled Dearborn. By the 1970s, Black Gangster Disciples were active, and GDs eventually controlled multiple buildings on the north side of the project. The Mickey Cobras remained in control of most of the project, including all the southern buildings. The courtyard between the buildings was often the site of sniper shootouts between Cobras and GDs. The Mickey Cobras continued to dominate the project throughout the 2000s. The Housing Authority renovated Dearborn in 5 phases, from 2007 to 2011. Number 8, Robert Taylor Homes. Construction of the Robert Taylor Homes began in 1960 and was completed in 1962. The complex was located in Bronzeville and contained 4,415 units throughout 28 high-rises, making it one of the largest public housing projects in American history. Each building was 16 stories tall, and they were identical, mostly located in U-shaped groups of 3. The Egyptian Cobras, also known as the Mickey Cobras, were one of the first gangs to claim Robert Taylor as their territory in the 1960s. The Dell Vikings gang also moved into the project, along with the Black Disciples. In the late 1960s, the Egyptian Cobras became the Cobra Stones and started selling heroin in the project. By the 1970s, the Devil's Disciples, Dell Vikings, and Cobra Stones dominated Robert Taylor as drug dealing and gang violence increased in the project. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the Mickey Cobras, Gangster Disciples, and Black Disciples dominated the housing project in battle for control on a daily basis. In the early 1990s, it was decided to replace Robert Taylor with a mixed-income community. By 2006, the Chicago Housing Authority moved out all residents, and in March of 2007, the last building was demolished. Number 9, Raymond Hilliard Center. The Raymond Hilliard Center is located on the northern end of the State Street corridor, on the near south side of Chicago. The complex was constructed in 1966 and contained 1,077 units. The project was designed by architect Bertrand Goldberg, who believed that other public housing projects were designed to punish tenants for being poor and did little other than warehouse them. Raymond Hilliard was built to be a structure which tenants would be proud to live in. Residents were screened carefully, and as a result, crime rates were lower at the property. It was the only CHA project never to require uniformed police detail, but there was some gang activity. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the Gangster Disciples were active at Raymond Hilliard. In 2002, renovations began and lasted until 2006. The complex is now a mixed-income community called the Hilliard Towers Apartments.
Number 10. Heraldic Ease Homes. The Heraldic Ease Homes project was completed in 1955 and located in the Bronzeville neighborhood on the near south side of Chicago. The complex contained 797 units and 8 buildings, 5 of which were 7 stories tall and 3 that were 9 stories. The Gangster Disciples dominated the project for decades. From 1989 to 1996, security sweeps were conducted, and if a resident didn't have ID, they could be arrested. The security guards were removed in the late 1990s, leading several gangs to attack the GDs in attempts to take over control of the complex. The GDs ruled for a substantial period of time, so there was not as much violence at the Ease compared to other projects. In the 2000s, rival gangs continued to try to force the GDs out the project, leading to numerous murders. Sadly, innocent residents were caught in the crossfire on multiple occasions. Demolition of the Heraldic Ease homes began in 2009, and the last building was torn down in 2011. Number 11. Henry Horner Homes. The Henry Horner homes were completed in 1957 and located in the near west side area of the city, adjacent to the Chicago Stadium. The complex contained 920 units and 7 buildings that were each 7 stories tall, and 2 buildings that were 15 stories tall. Henry Horner's design was similar to the Heraldic Ease homes. In the 1960s, the Egyptian Cobras, Imperial Chaplains, and 14th Street Clovers were active in the project. The Vice Lords eventually rose to power, conquering the Clovers and forcing out the Cobras. In the late 1960s, the Supreme Gangsters moved in from Inglewood and began recruiting, leading to beef with the Vice Lords. The Supreme Gangsters ultimately became the Black Gangster Disciples, establishing GD presence at Henry Horner. In the 1970s, the Blackstone Rangers dominated the project. By the 1980s, active gangs included the GDs, Four Corner Hustlers, Traveling Vice Lords, and Gangster Stones. The Gangster Stones were founded at the project's 150 Lake Street building, which they called the Fortress. The project was featured in the 1995 movie, Losing Isaiah, starring Halle Berry. Demolition of the Henry Horner homes began in 1995, and the last building was torn down in 2008. Number 12. Rockwell Gardens. Rockwell Gardens was constructed in 1959 and contained 1,126 units in 8 buildings, which was each 10 or 13 stories high. The complex was located in the East Garfield Park neighborhood on the near west side of Chicago. The first decade of the complex was decent, but that changed after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., which led to riots in 1968 that destroyed most of the west side of Chicago. In the years that followed, gangs like the Vice Lords began to take over the development. The Renegade Vice Lords, Traveling Vice Lords, Conservative Vice Lords, and Gangster Disciples began taking over the heroin trade in the area, leading to numerous murders. By the late 1980s, Rockwell Gardens was a part of Chicago's Operation Clean Sweep, which was a government and police initiative to eliminate gang activity and drug deals in the city's housing projects. The New Life security team helped reduce crime at the property, but once budget cuts were made, crime and violence reemerged. Demolition began in 2000, and the last building was torn down in 2006. Number 13. Maplewood Courts. The Maplewood Courts projects were constructed in 1961 and contained 300 units in 2 buildings, each 7 stories tall. The complex was located on the near west side and were essentially an extension of the Rockwell Gardens project. The Four Corner Hustlers were active in the project, and by the 1970s, gang and drug activity increased rapidly. Crime continued throughout the 1980s and 1990s, and in 2014, Maplewood Courts was demolished.
Number 14. LeClaire Courts. LeClaire Courts was built in 1950 and located in the Garfield Ridge neighborhood on the southwest side of Chicago. The development initially contained 316 units of 2-story row houses. An extension was built in 1954, which consisted of another 300 units of row houses. LeClaire Courts was one of the first integrated public housing projects in North America and were initially ideal for African Americans. The development wasn't overcrowded like the high-rises located in Chicago's inner city. However, the traditional troubles of public housing eventually took hold. In the 1960s, blacks started buying homes in the neighborhood as whites fled Garfield Ridge. Several gangs were active in the project throughout the 1970s. White gangs like the Mad Lads and Insane Popes formed to fight black gangs, including the Black Gents. In the 1980s, the Four Corner Hustlers were active, along with the Black Stones and Vice Lords. All the gangs were part of the People Alliance, so initially, they operated in peace and didn't feud. By the late 1980s, the Black Gents joined the Black Gangster Disciples, and gang activity rapidly increased at LeClaire. After several decades of insufficient funding for maintenance, the buildings gradually deteriorated, and in 2009, LeClaire residents were relocated to prepare for demolition and redevelopment. The last building was torn down in 2011, and in 2023, the Housing Authority authorized a new mixed-income residential development to be built where LeClaire Courts was previously located. Number 15. Racine Courts. Racine Courts was completed in 1950 and located in the Washington Heights neighborhood on the far south side. It contains 121 units of two-story row houses, making it one of the smallest projects built by the Housing Authority. Racine Courts is located in a middle-class residential area, and each unit has a full basement. They were built in 27 clusters, most located on Racine Avenue. In the 1960s, residents were unhappy with the Housing Authority's mismanagement of the project and organized a group called Hometown to manage the property as a co-op. In 1969, Hometown assisted tenants in purchasing their own apartments at affordable rates while Hometown managed the property. Racine Courts has been a co-op ever since. The Gangster Disciples and Black Stone gangs have been active throughout the project but have not been able to completely take over the complex thanks to an effective neighborhood watch program. Number 16. Trumbull Park Homes. Trumbull Park Homes was built in 1938 and contained 434 units in 55 buildings. The complex is located in the South Deering neighborhood on the far south side of Chicago. Trumbull Park contained two-story row houses and four-story apartment buildings, similar to the Jane Addams homes, and was built to house poor white residents who were suffering due to the Great Depression and were interested in obtaining employment in the numerous industries on the far south side of the city. On July 30th, 1953, the Housing Authority moved a black woman named Betty Howard, along with her family, into the complex. Starting on August 5th, 1953, and lasting for several months, white residents at the Trumbull Park Homes tormented Howard by throwing rocks and setting off fireworks and stink bombs at her unit. It was so bad that the Howards needed to be escorted everywhere by the Chicago police. In October of 1953, the Housing Authority moved 10 more black families into the project, leading to more violence and daily riots, which lasted for more than 7 months. CHA threatened to evict anyone that tormented the Howards, and soon enough, several evictions took place due to residents who refused to comply. In 1963, the Housing Authority mandated that blacks had the right to live in the complex, but it remained mostly white until the 1970s, when Wisconsin Steel began layoffs, leading to white flight in South Deering. By the 1980s, the Trumbull Park Homes were majority Mexican and African American, and gangs like the Gangster Disciples and conservative Vice Lords began taking over. The Mexicans eventually established the Spanish Vice Lords and King Cobras, who also attempted to take over the development. In the 1990s, the Gangster Disciples and King Cobras joined forces against the conservative Vice Lords and the Spanish Vice Lords, but the Spanish Vice Lords and King Cobras were ultimately ran out of the project. Although several gangs were active in the buildings, Trumbull Park was one of CHA's safest projects. The property was renovated in the 2000s and still stands today. Number 17. Altgeld Gardens Homes. The Altgeld Gardens Homes project was completed in 1945 and located in the Riverdale neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. The complex contained 1,498 units, most of which were two-story row houses, and was built for black veterans returning from World War II. In 1954, CHA built the neighboring Philip Murray Homes, which consisted of 500 more two-story row house units. Altgeld Gardens was nicknamed Chicago's toxic donut due to having the highest concentration of hazardous waste sites in the United States. There are 50 landfills and more than 300 industrial facilities near the project. Residents have been subject to contaminated drinking water, and the community has some of the city's highest rates of cancer. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, there were several active gangs in the development, including the Vice Lords, P-Stones, GDs, and BDs. Altgeld Gardens and the Philip Murray homes are still standing and currently contain a total of 1,971 renovated units. Number 18. Wentworth Gardens. The Wentworth Gardens projects were completed in 1947 and originally contained 422 units in low-rise buildings. The complex was located in Armour